I do not wish to talk about it myself, but I've been a victim of quite a bit of suppression. So has any other legitimate researcher in this area.
The government is protecting the industry, the oil industry, because they're in bed together. Tremendous amounts of contributions for politicians come from these huge companies, and these huge companies have been covering up for years what we're doing to the planet.
Today, we don't have so much big kingdoms. We have cartels. We have a whole set of cartels in an area, interlocking corporations, and behind this, we have a few people who are quite wealthy and who own most things. Any time we have a very powerful cartel or set of people that control a lot of things, that resists any means of changing its inflow of control and its inflow of funds and money and its power. You know, everybody's trying to be the big monkey. It's really as simple as that.
Here we have all the methods. Some of these are common sense, but every one of these are ones I have encountered and investigated personally with geniuses, engineering geniuses and physics geniuses, but strategically impaired inventors. Black shelving. So someone comes along, they offer you $20 million for your device, it's a corporation, they put it on a shelf. Boom. National security orders. We're going to show you one from a man we just met with. Patent seizures. Financial entanglements from investors because they're doing their whole business and legal strategy wrong. Legal entanglements where they end up in court. Threats to the individuals. I had a guy under contract building one. All you had to do is have some thugs come in and say, you, your wife, you're dead, you stop this. And he stopped. And then scientific fraud.
The more powerful the agency, the more powerful the group, the more powerful the cartel, the more they will resort not only to legal means, but to extra legal means to suppress their competition. For example, the greatest espionage in the world is industrial espionage between one corporation and another right here in America. They're the ones that hire all the spies and the spooky equipment and everything like that by far more than the intel agents do. And it's not one cartel, so there are many, many groups in energy, and each of those has become very powerful in its own area, and each one does not wish to see simple little electrical taps pulling out enormous energy from the vacuum. They would much rather see you burning a lot more oil and so forth.
So there's something nefarious afoot. It kind of makes sense from, right, I'm threatening an oil monopoly and things like that. I said pretty early on, the problem is suppression. It wasn't really, how do I make a free energy machine? It's, how do I not get suppressed? Because what's the point? If you make it, you're just going to get clobbered.
And then you have a really big one, media corruption. Where why doesn't everyone in the world know these things have existed? Because, as you'll see in a little bit, the media at a certain high level have operatives from the intelligence community who kill stories on demand. And then the worst, of course, wet works.
It's not totally mafia type stuff. It's not like, you know, you just flat get shot. There's some of that.
The typical threat to the family, right? It's a typical mafia, right? It's not, just watch The Godfather, see how they work, right?
There's an interesting record of people that have come up with new alternatives to the oil and gas industry who have met untimely demises. I don't know if you'd say that's true in terms of Nikola Tesla specifically, but he was hit by a taxi cab back in the early 1930s and didn't die immediately, but then died alone in a hospital room a few years later.
When they found out that Tesla had passed away in the Hotel New Yorker, they came in, they had the manager of the hotel open the safe, and they took all of Tesla's papers.
So here you have an actual FBI document, and the Department of Defense is demanding they turn over what they seized in 1943. Now, this used to be an urban myth. Oh, well, he had these secret inventions and papers, and the government stole it. No, it's right here.
That technology and what was in those boxes, what was written in those papers, we do not know, and we may not ever know.
So they go in, the FBI takes it. Here the Department of Defense years later is saying, we want all those papers that you confiscated in 1943 upon Nikola Tesla's death. And then you have just flat out patent confiscation through national security orders. Look at this. This is 12 years ago. 5,135 inventions seized under national security orders. In 1971 list includes patents for solar photovoltaic that were subject to restriction because they were more than 20% efficient. The most efficient solar panel you can get right now in 2022 is 22.8%. These were way past that in, how many years is that? 51 years ago. Okay, we're not talking about an extraterrestrial spacecraft or anti-gravity or gravity control. We're talking about just a super efficient solar panel. Those are confiscated. This is one of my favorite statements of this report. One may fairly ask if disclosure of such technologies could really have been detrimental to the national security, or whether the opposite would be closer to the truth.
Yeah, we hear the words vital interests of national security. Well, what we're really talking about there in terms of Iraq, for example, in the early 2000s, which was all trumped up. There were no weapons of mass destruction. That's what was being touted by the media, Sir Judith Miller at the New York Times and others, to justify what we were doing to get rid of Saddam Hussein. But in fact, the only national security implication of that was the oil industries, what they get from it.
But again, what does national security mean here? Oil, gas, petrodollar, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan Chase. That's the national security in the abused, corrupt system.
It's a policy that the military seems to feel is necessary for national security. However, at this point, we often wonder, 50 years after World War II and the Cold War, whether such sequestering is necessary, especially when fossil fuels are a major cause of global warming.
So here we have a man. He was fired, Dr. Tom Vallone, he's a PhD physicist. He was a patent examiner, and he saw these amazing technologies being confiscated. This is not a conspiracy theory. And he blew the whistle, they fired him. You know, because he saw things that would save the planet. Now, this is way back in the 80s or 90s.
Patent sequestering, which is actually called secretizing, public needs to know at least that every major military agency has a representative at the Patent Office.
Patent Office in its current approach is it's actually breaking the law. It's trying to make happy the physicists who are with American Physical Society, to keep them in power with their ideas, you might say, and withhold from public use good inventions that could solve our problems, like the energy crisis.
Boeing had just finished some work on some propulsion system. Boeing had done it for the Air Force, and they finished the job. And then they applied to their customer at the Air Force for permission to use it on Boeing's commercial airlines, and they were denied. An example of the ongoing suppression of things that seem to be innocuous, and a slight improvement in technology.
So, you know, T. Henry Moray had a device, no input energy once he got it set up, output 50 kilowatts. He had multiple assassination attempts and finally was bankrupted in his lab. This was the 1930s.
There is absolutely no question that T. Henry Moray had a system that produced about 50 kilowatts out of a 55-pound box. There's all kinds of skullduggery that happened there. The Russians even tried to kidnap him at one time. It reads like a James Bond movie, but it's real. It really happened, and it really happened here in the United States.
Here's a friend of mine. He was a Wright-Patterson Project Blue Book guy, but when he retired, he built a device that you could put on the air intake of a car. This is in the 80s, where you would get anywhere from 20 to 40% more range, miles per gallon, on conventional.
I treat air, and out of air, I make it more than just providing oxygen for the combustion process. There are combustion-stimulating molecules and radicals generated in this process. Thunderstorm in a bottle.
He had his lab vandalized, everything stolen, bomb threats, etc. This is a colonel who put his entire life savings into something in the 80s that would have been a game changer. But it wasn't a free energy device. It wasn't something just running out of the 0 point. It would have just gotten more efficiency and cleaned up the air.
The Environmental Protection Agency is a bit of a dictatorial police agency. They call themselves a protecting agency, but they are a police agency. EPA cannot approve a fuel-saving device. They put out reams of documentation stating that something will not work.
This gentleman actually took a device from a Russian immigrant and another and kind of packaged it. He didn't actually understand it that much. And you had almost 27 watts going in, 7,460 watts going out, and tested and verified by multiple labs.
Gray started developing this idea 8 years ago. For the past year and a half, he's been trying to get someone in the U.S. government interested. So far, he's had little luck. Gray says he's been getting the same reaction he got 30 years ago when he first proposed his theory.
Get this guy out of here, he is crazy.
But Gray says it's paranoia. The scientific community isn't willing to accept teachings opposite all previous learning. And the military aerospace industry is afraid to admit decades and billions of dollars worth of research have been wasted.
Now, unfortunately, this disappeared because he actually took the ideas from some geniuses and was trying to make a lot of money. And so his became, I'm calling this crazy inventor syndrome. It's not very nice, but I mean, it's kind of crazy. And here's why it's crazy. They think I have the best thing since sliced bread, and the world's going to be the path to my door. And they don't realize they're going to have corrupt interests from the national security state, corporations, and all kinds of other people stop them. So they think they're going to do a normal investment and normal venture capital and patent it or keep the secret sauce of how it works away from everyone. And in every single case for 100 plus years, they've taken that knowledge to their grave.
You've seen The Paranoid Inventor, plenty of stories on those guys. It's my precious. I can't share my secret. Everybody will take it from me, right? This paranoid, I have it, this is worth gazillions of dollars and everything else. And they're so naive, they have no idea. At first, they think they're the first, right? Have no idea the history of this and what happens to the others.
So, having done that for 31 years now, I have been dealing with people with these devices since 1991. Almost all of them fall into some part of this syndrome, and it's a tragedy. You'll see the device, I'll have engineers come in and test it, they go, oh no, I'm gonna keep it secret, nobody can know but me, and I need to make a bunch of money, they wanna be the next Rockefeller of energy, and the next thing you know, they're dead, or the device is confiscated, or it vanishes in a buyout. So this guy had the same problem. He had a device, they have it there still running, but they think that no one can know this but them. They're buying into the paranoia. My answer is open source it, dump it on the internet, blockchain, or any way you can. You have no patent, no intellectual property. The whole world knows about it, and every scientific lab in the world can reproduce it. We're going to get to this strategy in a minute. That's how we go. We got to do that. Because the very definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That's attributed to Einstein. But how true is that here? So we have to change our strategy.
Many of these inventors are really good at the technical stuff, but they're not great communicators.
This power is something I have given my life for you the people. Now I set up this demonstration for y'all. You don't have to be a rocket scientist.
They're not good at business. They're not. Like, God can make technical geniuses and he can make business savvy people, but rarely do the two come together in one person.
This story is fascinating because he had a tiny, you know what 17 watts is? Like a 20 watt light bulb. It was putting out 200 watts, 10 to 15 times more output than input. This is in the 80s, this is 40 years ago.